Jax's revenge domain. The day the CEO's son fired me, he smiled like he was handing out an award. I just got promoted, Jason Pierce said, letting the pause stretch. Chairs shifted around the boardroom table. A few people clapped, unsure how long they were supposed to keep going. My name is Daniel Rodriguez. I'm 47 years old, and I've been Chief Risk Officer at Pierce Capital Management for 8 years. What happened next changed everything. And as part of that promotion, Jason continued, I need to set an example. He looked straight at me. Daniel, you're terminated, effective immediately. Someone inhaled sharply behind me. I stayed seated. For what reason? I asked. My voice surprised even me. Calm, clear. He adjusted his tie. During my time working under you, you consistently blocked our progress. You've been difficult to work with. The word hung there. Difficult. Word spreads fast in offices. I felt eyes turn, whispers starting before anyone had the decency to check if it made sense. That's not accurate. That's said. He shrugged. That's my experience. I turned to the HR director. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her pen hovered uselessly over her notepad. So there's no documentation? I asked. We'll follow up, she murmured. I stood then, not abruptly, not dramatically. I did my job, I said. Every time you brought me deals that cut corners, I said no. If that's blocking progress now, then we've redefined the term. Jason smiled again, thinner this time. You're dismissed. I nodded once. Thank you. That did it. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else whispered my name like a warning. I walked out without raising my voice, without packing a box, without giving him the reaction he was hunting for. In the hallway, Brian Cooper from finance caught up to me. Daniel, he said low, they didn't make you sign anything. I know, I replied. You're just leaving? For now? He hesitated. I'm sorry. I met his eyes. You don't need to be. Behind us, the conference room door closed. Inside, they were already rewriting what had happened. I kept walking, my phone buzzing once with an unfamiliar number, then stopping. By the time I reached the elevator, the whispers had followed me. By the time the door slid shut, the lie had started settling in. And somewhere upstairs, someone was realizing they had made a decision they didn't fully understand. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing. A message from Lisa Martinez in operations. I didn't know it was that bad. Another, shorter. HR says they'll clarify later. Clarify. The word people use when they've already chosen a side. I didn't drive away right away. Instead, I answered a call from Lisa. Her voice sounded tight. They're saying you were blocking deals, she said. Old school, hard to work with. I enforced compliance, I replied. I know, she said quickly. I told them that. There was a pause. They didn't ask again. The next email came from HR before noon. No greeting, no signature beyond a department name. This message confirms the termination of your employment effective today. That was it. No reason listed, no reference to misconduct, no acknowledgement of the accusation that had been aired in front of the entire board. I forwarded it to myself, then replied with one sentence. Please provide the completed termination documentation. No answer. At lunch, I met Brian at a cafe downtown. He hovered instead of sitting, eyes flicking around like he was afraid the walls could hear him. Why didn't you defend yourself? He asked quietly. Because lies collapse faster when you let them stand, I said. He swallowed. They're acting like it's settled. It isn't, I said. Not yet. He leaned in. They never finished the paperwork. I looked at him. What do you mean? I mean, he said, lowering his voice. There's no signed cause, no offboarding checklist, no transition approval. Someone pushed it through verbally and assumed legal would clean it up. And legal? He shook his head. Legal hasn't touched it. My phone buzzed again. A message from a number I didn't recognize. Call me when you can. It's about today. I slid the phone into my pocket without replying. Inside the building, I could see people moving past the glass, talking in small, urgent clusters. No one waved. No one looked directly at me. The lie had already taken shape. It had a voice, witnesses, and a paper trail that didn't quite exist yet. And that gap, that quiet, unfinished space, was the only thing keeping the truth alive. I hadn't thought about Jason's time under me in years. I didn't need to. The day he accused me, the memory came back on its own. He was 26 then, fresh MBA from Wharton, new confidence that came with his last name. He showed up at my office late one afternoon with a laptop open and a grin that assumed agreement. "Just sign off on this," he said. "It moves the Hartwell acquisition up 2 weeks." I scanned the numbers. The deal was worth $180 million, and what he was showing me bypassed every safeguard we had. "This skips the SEC compliance review entirely," I said. He leaned closer. "No one will notice." "Auditors will," I said. "And so will regulators when they ask why we fast-tracked a deal this size." He laughed like I'd made a joke. "You're being dramatic." I closed the laptop and slid it back to him. "I'm being accurate." His smile dropped. "Do you know who my father is?" "I know what SEC regulations say," I replied. "They're not the same thing." He straightened, voice sharper now. "You're making me look incompetent." I met his eyes. "You're doing that yourself." He stood there, jaw tight. "Everyone else said this was fine. Then let them sign it," I said. "Put your name on it." He didn't. Instead, he went over my head. I documented the exchange, copied legal, and flagged the issue the way I had been trained to do for 18 years in this business. 2 days later, compliance called him in. The shortcut was denied. He was told firmly not to try it again, and that any future attempts to bypass review processes would be reported directly to the board. The $180 million deal went through 3 weeks later, properly reviewed, with 2 significant risk factors that our compliance team caught and negotiated down. He didn't look at me after that, not once. He spoke around me in meetings, referred to me as old school, told anyone who would listen that I enjoyed blocking progress. The narrative he built was simple. I was the problem, the bottleneck, the guy who said no to good ideas. 3 weeks later, I heard it for the first time. "He's hard on him," someone whispered near the elevators. "Kind of a bully." I confronted Jason once, months later, when he tried to reframe the Hartwell incident during a quarterly review in front of the senior team. "You know what happened?" I said. "No," he told me, looking around the table for support. "I remember a situation where better communication could have prevented confusion." He shrugged. "You could have handled it differently." "Differently how?" I asked. "More collaboratively. Less rigid. You wanted me to approve a deal that violated federal regulations," I said, keeping my voice level. "There's no collaborative way to break the law." He smiled without warmth. "That's your interpretation." That was when I understood. To him, accountability felt personal. Boundaries felt like attacks, and facts, when they cost him something, became matters of opinion that he could rewrite later. Years passed, titles changed. He climbed the ladder, partly through competence, mostly through genetics. I kept doing my job, enforcing rules, protecting the company from itself. The story stayed the same, just with higher stakes. Every deal Jason brought me, every shortcut he suggested, became a test. Not of my competence, but of my willingness to bend. And every time I said no, the tension ratcheted up another notch. He didn't fire me because I wronged him. He fired me because I remembered, and because memory made his version of events inconvenient. That evening, I opened my laptop and logged into the personal archive I hadn't touched in years. Not company servers, my own records, the ones I kept, because 18 years in finance had taught me never to trust memory alone. The first file loaded slowly, then another, then another. My name was still there, not buried, not outdated. Clear and current, responsible authority, final compliance signatory, operational oversight, every SEC filing, every regulatory report, every audit trail that kept Pierce Capital in business and out of federal court. I exhaled once. Steady. My phone rang. It was Lisa again. "They're scrambling," she said. "Legal keeps asking who signed off on your termination." "They won't find it," I said. She hesitated. "Daniel, did you ever transfer your authority? Did anyone ask you to sign over your compliance responsibilities?" "No," I replied. "No one asked." The silence stretched between us. In that quiet, I could almost hear her putting the pieces together. "They're talking about sending you something to sign," she said carefully, "just to clean things up." "I won't," I said. "You don't even want to see it?" "I already know what it says. Some kind of retroactive transfer form, backdated to make it look like the handoff happened before today. Daniel, Lisa, I've been doing this job for 18 years. I know what proper termination looks like, and this isn't it." 20 minutes later, the email arrived. Subject line, clarification request. No apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a document attached, pre-filled, dated that morning, asking me to confirm that all regulatory responsibilities had been properly transferred prior to my termination. The document was thorough, I'll give them that. It covered everything from SEC filings to FINRA communications, from audit oversight to compliance reporting. There was even a section acknowledging that failure to properly transfer these authorities could result in regulatory violations and potential penalties. They knew exactly what they'd done, and they knew exactly what it could cost them. I didn't open the attachment. Instead, I forwarded the entire email to a separate folder labeled Evidence and replied with 3 words: "I do not consent." The phone rang 15 minutes later. Unfamiliar voice, all business. "Daniel, this is Stephen Walsh from Walsh & Associates External Legal Counsel," he said, clipped and professional. "We're hoping to resolve a few procedural inconsistencies." "There aren't inconsistencies," I said. "There's absence." He paused. "You understand the potential impact this could have on the firm?" "I understand exactly what it already has," I replied. "We're not assigning blame here," he said, which was lawyer speak for "we're absolutely assigning blame, just not to our client." "That's interesting," I said, "because yesterday your client did exactly that." Another pause, then quieter. "If you could just review the documentation we sent." I reviewed it, I declined it. That's the end of my involvement. "Mr. Rodriguez, I need you to understand something. Pierce Capital has $3.2 billion in assets under management. They have regulatory obligations that don't pause for internal personnel matters." "I know," I said. "I wrote most of those obligation reports. Then you know that leaving these authorities in limbo creates exposure." "I didn't create the limbo," I said. "I won't solve it for you either." When the call ended, I closed the laptop. For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't Pierce Capital's problem to solve. I wasn't their safety net, their compliance backstop, their guy who made sure the math added up and the regulators stayed happy. For the first time in years, I let my authority sit exactly where it was. Untouched, untransferred, still mine. And somewhere across town, lawyers were realizing that Daniel Rodriguez wasn't going to fix their mess for them. The next morning brought rain and a call from Brian. His voice was tight. "It's getting worse," he said. Stephen Walsh showed up unannounced. He didn't schedule a meeting, just walked into Harold's office with someone from the SEC liaison team. I'd been expecting this call, but it still made my coffee taste bitter. Who was with him? Patricia Mills. She handles regulatory coordination. I knew Patricia. Thorough, by the book, allergic to anything that looked like a compliance shortcut. If she was asking questions, it meant the SEC was already paying attention. What did they want? Documentation. Signatures. A paper trail that shows your termination was handled properly. I was quiet for a moment, watching the rain streak down my kitchen window. And there isn't one, Daniel. There's nothing. Jason made the announcement, HR sent an email, and everyone assumed someone else would handle the details. The rain was coming down harder now. Somewhere in downtown Atlanta, lawyers were learning the difference between wanting something done and actually doing it. "How bad is it?" I asked, though I already knew. Patricia asked to see your formal resignation letter. When they couldn't produce one, she asked to see the transition documentation. When they couldn't produce that either, she asked who currently holds your regulatory signing authority. Brian was quiet for a moment. They couldn't answer, Daniel. Nobody knows who's supposed to be signing off on SEC reports, who's handling FINRA communications, who's responsible for the quarterly compliance attestations that are due next week. I set down my coffee. Next week? Tuesday, the Q3 compliance package. It requires sign-off from the chief risk officer, and Pierce Capital didn't have one anymore. That afternoon, I got a call I'd been half expecting but hoping wouldn't come. "Daniel, this is Patricia Mills from SEC Regulatory Coordination." Her voice was formal, careful. When Patricia Mills called you directly, it meant someone had already noticed a problem and wanted answers before it became a bigger problem. Hello, Patricia. I'm calling about Pierce Capital Management. There seems to be some confusion about current regulatory authority assignments. I leaned back in my chair. Through my window, I could see normal people living normal lives, walking dogs, checking mail, problems that could be solved with conversations and common sense. What kind of confusion? Well, according to our records, you're listed as Chief Risk Officer and primary compliance signatory for all SEC filings. But when I contacted Pierce Capital this morning about their quarterly attestation, they informed me your employment had been terminated. That's correct. I see. And was there a formal transition of these responsibilities? The question hung in the air between us. Patricia already knew the answer, or she wouldn't be calling me directly, but she needed to hear it from me. No, I said, there wasn't. Silence. Then, Mr. Rodriguez, you understand what this means for their compliance status. I do. Their Q3 package is due Tuesday. Without proper signatory authority, they're in violation of federal filing requirements. I knew Patricia well, enough to hear what she wasn't saying directly. Pierce Capital was 72 hours away from regulatory penalties that would make their current crisis look like a minor inconvenience. Has anyone from Pierce Capital contacted you about this? She asked. Yes. And? I declined to assist. Another pause. When Patricia spoke again, her tone was neutral, professional, but I could hear the wheels turning. I need to ask this directly, Mr. Rodriguez. In your professional opinion, based on your knowledge of Pierce Capital's current compliance status, should the SEC be concerned about their ability to meet federal regulatory requirements? The question every compliance officer dreads and trains for their entire career. The moment when you have to choose between loyalty to a former employer and integrity to the system that keeps financial markets stable. Patricia, I can't speak to their current status since I'm no longer employed there. What I can tell you is that as of yesterday morning, I was the sole signatory for all major compliance attestations, and as of yesterday afternoon, that authority hadn't been formally transferred to anyone else. She was quiet for a long moment. Thank you for your candor, Mr. Rodriguez. Someone will be in touch with Pierce Capital shortly. After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen, rain still pattering against the window, and realized that my quiet refusal to cooperate had just triggered a formal SEC inquiry. Jason Pierce had fired me to make a point about power, but power, real power, doesn't come from titles or last names. It comes from being the person other people need to keep their world from falling apart. And I wasn't that person for Pierce Capital anymore. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Now. I ignored it. 20 minutes later, another message. The SEC is asking questions. This affects everyone. Then my phone rang. Harold Pierce himself. Daniel, we have a situation. No, I said, you have a situation. Don't be clever with me. Patricia Mills just left our office. She's treating this like a formal investigation. I could hear tension in his voice, the kind that comes when someone who's used to controlling outcomes realizes they're not in control anymore. What did she want? Documentation that doesn't exist. Signatures that were never collected. A paper trail showing that your termination was handled according to federal requirements. And we need your help to fix this. I looked out at the rain. Harold, yesterday your son fired me in front of the entire board, accused me of misconduct, and had me escorted out like a security threat. Today you want my help? This is bigger than yesterday, he said. Patricia Mills mentioned potential penalties, regulatory action. She used the phrase pattern of compliance failures. That got my attention. Pattern? She's not just looking at your termination, Daniel. She's looking at everything. Every deal Jason fast-tracked, every shortcut he tried to take. Every time you said no to something, she wants to know why. I understood now. The SEC wasn't just investigating a botched termination. They were investigating whether Pierce Capital had a culture of skirting regulations, with me as the firewall that had been keeping them out of trouble. And now the firewall was gone. How much trouble are you in? I asked. Harold was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I don't know. Patricia wouldn't say. But she asked for financial records going back 3 years. She wants to review every major transaction, every compliance decision, every deal that was approved or rejected. The Hartwell acquisition? That was the first thing she asked about. Of course it was. The $180 million deal where Jason had tried to bypass SEC review. The deal I'd forced through proper channels, adding 3 weeks to the timeline and probably saving Pierce Capital from a massive penalty. Harold, you need to understand something. I'm not your employee anymore. I'm not your problem solver. I'm not going to fix this for you. What do you want? Money? Reinstatement? A public apology? I want to not be involved. You're already involved, Daniel. Your name is on every document. Your signature is on every filing. Like it or not, you're part of this. He was right, and we both knew it. But there was a difference between being part of something and being responsible for cleaning it up. Good luck, Harold. Wait. I hung up. An hour later, Jason called. His voice was different now. Smaller. The arrogance from yesterday replaced by something that sounded almost like panic. Daniel, I need to ask you something. I'm listening. When Patricia Mills reviews the Hartwell deal, what is she going to find? I almost smiled. The truth. Which is that you tried to circumvent federal regulations to speed up a $180 million acquisition, and I stopped you. Silence. Is that going to look bad? Jason, you tried to skip SEC review on the largest deal in company history. How do you think that's going to look? But it worked out fine. The deal went through. Everyone made money. It went through because I forced it through proper channels. Because I made you follow the rules you wanted to ignore. Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was even smaller. Can you help us explain that to them? No. Daniel, please. My father, the company, this could destroy everything. You should have thought of that yesterday. And I hung up on him too. The next 48 hours moved fast. Tuesday morning, Pierce Capital missed their SEC filing deadline, not because they forgot, but because they literally had no one with legal authority to sign the documents. Brian called me around noon. It's chaos here, he said. Patricia Mills showed up with 2 other people. They're not asking questions anymore. They're taking files. Taking them where? SEC field office in Atlanta. Full regulatory review. Harold's locked in his office with 3 different lawyers, and Brian paused. Jason's been paused. Removed from all operational duties. Board vote this morning. Unanimous. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. Not satisfaction exactly, but clarity. The truth was finally moving faster than the lies. What about the compliance package? They hired an emergency consultant, former SEC attorney. She's trying to sort through 8 years of your files to figure out what needs immediate attention. 8 years of my work. Every deal I'd reviewed, every risk I'd flagged, every time I'd said no to something that looked profitable but felt dangerous. All of it spread out on conference tables, being examined by people who understood the difference between cutting corners and cutting throats. Brian, can I ask you something? Sure. In all the meetings, all the times Jason complained about me blocking deals, did anyone ever ask to see the deals I was blocking? Long pause. No. We assumed he knew what he was talking about. Wednesday afternoon, Stephen Walsh called me. One last time. His tone was different. Professional, but defeated. Daniel, the board would like to offer you a consulting contract, temporary basis, $350 per hour to help transition your responsibilities properly. $350 an hour. More than I'd ever made as chief risk officer. Funny how much more valuable I became the moment they couldn't have me. For how long? 6 months initially. Help train a replacement, assist with the SEC review, ensure compliance continuity. And Jason? Mr. Jason Pierce is no longer involved in operational decisions. I looked out my window. Same rain, same ordinary people, but something felt different. Like the world had shifted slightly, reset itself to a more honest position. I'm going to decline, I said. Daniel, I have to advise you that refusing this offer could be seen as uncooperative by regulatory authorities. Stephen, I was uncooperative when I refused to sign documents that could have gotten Pierce Capital into federal trouble. I was uncooperative when I wouldn't help cover up a botched termination. And I'm being uncooperative now by not cleaning up a mess I didn't make. I paused. But here's the thing about being uncooperative with the wrong people. It's usually the right thing to do. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and started typing. Not an email to Pierce Capital, not a letter to the SEC, but an application to Meridian Financial Group. Smaller firm, better reputation, cleaner operation. I'd been putting off the call for months, telling myself I was comfortable where I was. Turned out comfortable was just another word for stuck. Thursday morning brought sunshine and a call from Lisa. "Daniel, you need to hear this." Patricia Mills finished her preliminary review. And she found $2.8 million in potential penalties. Deals that should have been flagged, shortcuts that violated federal requirements, documentation that was incomplete or missing entirely. $2.8 million. Not company-ending money for Pierce Capital, but enough to make every future deal more expensive, every client meeting more complicated, every regulatory filing more scrutinized. But here's the interesting part, Lisa continued. Every violation she found, every problem deal, they all happened after you'd either been overruled or excluded from the decision. That stopped me cold. What do you mean? I mean, she compared your compliance recommendations against actual deal outcomes. Every time you said no, every time you flagged a risk, she tracked what happened when they went ahead anyway. Patricia Mills had done what no one at Pierce Capital had ever bothered to do. She'd checked my math, and my math was right. The Hartwell acquisition you held up for proper review, clean, no issues. The Blackstone deal Jason fast-tracked over your objections last year, $800,000 penalty for inadequate disclosure. The Morrison merger you wanted to delay for due diligence, SEC fined them $400,000 for rushing incomplete filings. I sat down slowly. 18 years of saying no, of being the difficult guy, the one who blocked progress. And it turned out I'd been protecting them from themselves the entire time. Lisa, what's the board saying? They want you back. Full reinstatement, public apology, whatever it takes. And Harold? Harold's stepping down. Early retirement. Board's bringing in an outside CEO. Jason? Jason's... She paused. Jason's looking for other opportunities. That evening, as I was preparing dinner, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Harold Pierce standing on my porch, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "Daniel, can we talk?" I let him in. We sat in my living room, two men who'd worked together for 8 years, finally having the conversation we should have had on Monday. "I built that company from nothing," he said, 20 years of my life, and I almost lost it because I was too proud to see what my son was doing. Harold, no, let me finish. You were right. About the deals, about the risks, about Jason, and instead of protecting you, I let him destroy the one thing keeping us honest. He looked at me directly. "I'm sorry. I appreciate that. The board authorized me to offer you anything. Any title, any salary. Just come back." I'd been thinking about this moment for 4 days. What I'd say, how I'd feel, whether the vindication would taste as sweet as I'd imagined. It didn't. It just felt like the end of something that should have ended better. "Harold, I already accepted another position." He blinked. "Where?" "Meridian Financial Group. I start Monday. We can match any offer. It's not about money. It's about working somewhere that values what I do before they're forced to by federal regulators." He nodded slowly, understanding. "And Jason?" I thought about his panicked phone calls, his desperate attempt to rewrite history, his belief that problems could be solved by being louder or having the right last name. "Jason learned what every compliance officer knows," I said. "The rules don't care who your father is, and neither does the truth." Harold stood up, extended his hand. "Thank you for everything, Daniel. We didn't deserve you." I shook his hand. "You deserve better leadership. You just didn't choose it." Monday morning, I started my new job. Same work, different building, but the coffee tasted better, and when I said no to something, people asked why instead of who I thought I was. 6 months later, I heard Pierce Capital was doing fine. New CEO, new policies, new respect for the word no. Jason found work at a smaller firm in Charlotte. No compliance authority, no deal approval, just basic financial analysis. Sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do, it's what you don't do. It's refusing to save people from the consequences of their own choices. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, the truth catches up to everyone.